Welcome to episode 21 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. If you're a new listener, we would really appreciate it if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. And if you're watching on YouTube, it would be a big time help if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. All right. This is going to be fully loaded, fun everybody. One. As of Sunday, May 30th, 2021, just when you thought the Toronto Maple Leafs were finally going to win their first playoff series in 17 years, they've done it again, everybody. They have done it again. They had a 3-1 series lead on the Montreal Canadiens, but now have lost back-to-back overtime games. The series is now tied at 3, heading to a Game 7, and Leafs Nation is absolutely terrified. And quite honestly, most of Leafs Nation, they're used to this now.
Yeah.
It's just rinse and repeat. And we are going to get into everything that has gone down over the last couple of games. And I promise you want to stay tuned for this one. But before we get into all that, it is time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How are you doing, man?
Well, I wish I had a better answer to the question of how am I doing, but I think it goes unsaid. I don't think I have to tell anyone how I'm doing. But it's going to be a fun one. You touched on it. Episode 21. Shout out to Leafs legend and Hall of Famer Borje Salming, whose number is in the rafters at Scotiabank Arena. Little side note, my wife's Swedish. We spent some time in Sweden, and Borje Salming has a very popular underwear line in Sweden.
Why am I not surprised by that?
Yeah, I grabbed a few pairs, solid underwear from Borje Salming.
Love it.
Shout out to Borje, and let's not waste any time, Bruno. Let's get right to it. Let's have some fun today.
Let's get right into it, man. So, everybody, the last time we talked, like I said, the Leafs had a 3-1 series lead. It was looking great. They were basically dominating the Montreal Canadiens. Like, ever since the moment that John Tavares went down, got stretchered off the ice, that was a tough situation to bounce back from. But the Leafs seemed to rally behind that and ripped off 3 straight wins. And I think everyone and their mother and their dogs and their cats all thought that the Leafs were going to move on to the second round. But since then, the Leafs in Game 5 got out to a bad start. The Montreal Canadiens took a 3-0 lead, and it was brutal. There's really no other way to say it, but the Leafs dug deep and found a way to tie the game. Jake Muzzin, of all people, scored 2 goals in the third period to tie it at 3 and send it to overtime. But then, of course, being the Toronto Maple Leafs, gave up a 2-0 in 5-on-5 overtime. If you simulate that game 1,000 times, if you simulate that overtime 1,000 times, Michael Lepore, how many times would the Leafs give up a 2-0? That had to be the one time in 1,000 times that they would do that. And of course, it happens in Game 5. So,
not to mention in the first minute, Bruno.
Just an absolute disaster. So then Game 6, Saturday night in Montreal, the big talk was all the fans coming into the building, 2,500 fans in the Bell Center.
Yeah.
And you know what? You could hear those fans at the start of the game. Like, it was loud.
Oh, for sure.
All the Habs were fired up.
For
and
sure.
The Habs, honestly, they came out on fire.
That was their best period of the series. Yeah, for sure.
They were incredible in that first period. That was the best I have seen the Habs play. And on the flip side, that is the worst I've seen the Leafs play in all 6 games. They look shell-shocked.
Yeah, maybe all season.
Like, that was just, it was a train wreck, man. Yeah. Like, I really do not think there's another way to put it. Like, that was terrible. That was the complete opposite of what I have seen from this team all season. But, I mean, they weathered that storm, and then it goes into the third period, still scoreless. The Habs scored 2 power play goals, And then the Leafs, just like they did in game 5, found a way to tie it up and send it to overtime and then dominate overtime. Montreal literally couldn't even touch the puck in that overtime frame. The Leafs outshot them 13-2. And then all it took was a turnover from Travis Dermott, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi sends this to a game 7. Lepore, we have a lot to unpack here.
Yep.
I'm just going to turn it over to you right now. Just go for it, man.
Just go. How much time I got? Is
as much time as you want.
Yeah, they kick us off the recording eventually because we're taking up too much data. You asked me months ago when we started this podcast, or when we decided to start this podcast, what I think a good title would be. And I kid you not, everyone, in about 3 seconds, it took me about 3 seconds to come up with the title for this podcast: Gluttons for Punishment. Because if you are a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you are without question a glutton for punishment. Very, very, very easy for me to come to that title. And the Toronto Maple Leafs had an incredible season. The take all year was that this team is different. This team has some solid defensive players. This team can score. We have a number 1 center who won the Maurice Rocket-Richard Trophy, scoring the most goals in the National Hockey League. What this series has reminded us all of is that this team is still the Leafs. And everybody knows what I mean by that. There are those things in sports that don't need any explanation, or they can't be explained, I'm sure. They're just those moments that make you roll your eyes, face palm. And there's different teams that go through this, but challenge me out there if you're a fan of any other team who's experienced this more than the Toronto Maple Leafs. But things that have no explanation, that just kind of happen. And if you go back on this series and look at the events that have taken place, this series has been so incredibly, quote unquote, Toronto Maple Leafs. And maybe it's a case of we didn't have to face much of that this year. Like I said, we had a great team, a great regular season. A lot of the questions that we've had from previous seasons have gotten answered. And maybe I guess it's just coming all at once, and it's coming in one swift kick in the nuts. But like, let's look back at certain things. Like we talked about it last week. Obviously, John Tavares getting injured. The types of goals Montreal was scoring, out puck possessing them. Then the 3-1 lead, and the thinking that this is different. What happened over the last 2 games is virtually impossible, both in the way of actual math and just in the way of sports. We quite often on this show, Bruno and I laugh and talk about hockey gods. Okay, hockey gods. Like Bruno touched on, our first period yesterday was absolutely fucking terrible. Terrible. That may have been the worst period the Leafs had all season. My buddy texted me after that period, a little panicked to how bad the Leafs were playing. I felt the opposite, because there was that thing in me that says, no, now they're going to win. Because again, hockey gods, you have no explanation. Montreal was getting their chances. One wouldn't go in for them. And maybe I have the mindset of a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, because had it been us peppering the opposition with 100 shots, I'd be waiting for the other team to score. So the fact that we got out of the first period tied at donuts, I was pretty optimistic.
Yeah, think about it, Lepore. That never happens.
Never.
Right? When the Leafs go through something like that, you would think at the end of that period it was 3-0 Montreal.
Oh,
and to escape that 0-0 was monumental.
On the road too. What game you would have like game over. And the fact that they got out of it, and Montreal can't be feeling that good about it either, especially they played their best period of the series and they were tied at 0. I mean, I forget the number. I looked up the stats. I glanced at the shot count from the second period on. And again, like these little things that have happened in the series. Look at the shot count from the second, third, and overtime to lose. Like, it's actually hilarious. And then again, like the gods, these gods in sports, things that don't need explanation that we just kind of know from watching sports our entire lives. Both games Just when does it happen? I'm saying this laughing. When does it happen that a team blows a 3-goal lead in the playoffs and any sport, like any team that like crumbles at the end? And I'll go back to like the Patriots Falcons Super Bowl. Like I would have bet $1 billion on the Patriots going into the overtime. Like Atlanta had no chance. People ask me often how I was the night the Bruins came back on the Leafs in 2013. When that overtime goal went in, I didn't even flinch because, again, I've watched.
You knew it was coming.
Yeah, I watched hockey and sports my entire life. There was no way the Leafs were going to come back on that. And like the Bruins have all the momentum, this and that. No chance. Us at home, I mean, there's no crowd, but at home, down 3-0, storm back. That happens. Like a turnover in the first minute. Again, quote unquote, the Leafs. And then for it to happen again in game 6, when does a team come firing back down 2 late in a playoff game? And then push it even further, they dominate the overtime. There's no explanation anymore. There are so many things in this series that make absolutely no sense, that are 1 in a million shots, all working against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And this is not me making excuses for my favorite hockey team. I'm just saying what it is. Like, I'll ask a Montreal Canadiens fan, guys, both times you didn't feel good going into the overtime. You didn't. Come on. Your team blew a lead. Like, all the momentum's with Toronto. Come on.
And you could even see, Lepore, when they were showing some of the reaction of the fans in the stands, they thought the season was over. And honestly, quite frankly, I thought the Montreal Canadiens, specifically in the game 6 overtime, getting absolutely pummeled, I think they were just resigned to the fact, like, okay, we gave it all we got.
Kind of waiting for it.
Took the Leafs to 6 games here. We just blew another lead, and we're about to lose. Our season's about to end.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers.
The fans just looked like it was done.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers on the zone time in the overtime. Because like Montreal would just come over the blue line, shoot it, and Toronto would come back the other way. Like Montreal had nothing in that overtime. Nothing. Like, again, 2 shots in the overtime, and the first shot was a Toffoli one that Campbell just blockered away, and the winning one was off the Dermott turnover. Like, no offensive zone pressure at all. And it's just absolute madness. Like, I'm gonna pull up those shots. So
yeah, the third period in overtime, the Leafs outshot the Habs 28-10.
28-10. And from the second period on, so that would have made it 34. So they more than 2-1 shot them from the second period on. And again, and I don't know, man, like, you tell me how much, like, I don't see this as like a big Carey Price series. Like, he's been very good. He's been solid, but we expect that. But I won't look if the Leafs lose on Monday. I mean, depending on how they lose, but I'm not going to look back at this series and be like, the Leafs got goal lead. Like, I don't see it that way. Like, he's playing well, he's playing solid, but other than that, like, save he made on Marner in game 1 on the 2-on-1.
Save on the 2-on-1.
Yeah, and then that Spezza one, but the Spezza one they won anyway. The Leafs won anyway, so it's not like he's making all these saves. Like, I often say there's those saves that are good saves, but you expect your goalie to make. Like, he's making a lot of those. But I don't recall like there haven't been, to me anyway, saves that like that's a goal, like that turned the series around or that turned the game around. Like, what do you think with that one?
I will say, though, the thing with Carey Price is that he makes very difficult saves look very, very easy.
That's true.
That's what he's just so good at. It's like, you think that there's an opening, you think that you have a one-time chance, and you have that split second, and Carey Price just calmly gets it back into position, makes the save, no problem, ho-hum. That's what he's very, very good at. Now, listen, I think Carey Price has been phenomenal in this series, but at the end of the day, this comes down to the players. And one thing that frustrated me, and I know this is just Sheldon Keefe sticking up for his star players, but it was after game 5, he was asked about the play of Marner and Matthews, and he made a comment saying, you know, the production hasn't been there, but these guys haven't given up a goal. Like, when they've been on the ice in this series, we have not been scored on, which is great. But at the end of the day, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner were two of the top 5 scorers in the National Hockey League this season, just in terms of point total. Austin Matthews, like you mentioned, Lepore, won the Rocket Richard. At the end of the day, these guys need to fucking score in these big moments. There are no more excuses. I don't want to hear this bullshit about all these shot attempts and how much they're dominating play and all these high danger scoring chances. We've talked about this all season, Lepore. The Leafs are masters of controlling the play. That's what they do. When the Leafs have the puck on their stick and they're playing their aggressive offensive style, they're always going to outpossess, outshoot, out everything the other team for the most part from an offensive perspective, especially when you look at the underlying numbers. But at the end of the day, in the playoffs, that has to translate to actual production on the score sheet. It just does. And when you're paying Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner $21 to $22 million of your salary cap, and they have 1 goal in 6 games on 49 combined shots, that is just simply not good enough. So I don't want to hear any more excuses. But here's what I will say. The Montreal Canadiens, I think they've actually done a nice job limiting the time and space of Matthews and Marner.
They're playing Matthews hard, especially.
They really, really are. And I think earlier in the series, Matthews in particular, it seemed like he had a little bit more room, a little bit more time and space to get his shot off. He had a little bit more quality scoring chances. But as the series has gone on, I think Montreal has found a way to, and I don't think they're in his head or anything like that, but they're finding a way to contain him, because when Matthews and Marner in that first line specifically is in the offensive zone, Lepore, man, it just seems like there's no room out there.
Yeah, Matthews isn't even skating well, to be honest. It's kind of weird.
Like the burst isn't there, the explosiveness isn't there. And, Matthews, he doesn't skate like Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon. But, when Matthews is on his game, this is still a dude who's 6'3". He has a long stride. He can move, man.
He looks dialed in, and when he's on, like to your point, and he's like not, almost like he looks like video game-ish, how it's like he's on turbo and there's no stopping him. He's not going to lose the puck. He has not had that at all.
He hasn't had that, especially the last like 2 or 3 games. It just hasn't been there. And, I saw even some people on Twitter saying like, oh, Montreal's clogging up the neutral zone. To me, I think the Leafs are actually like moving through the neutral zone where I think they're just like completely getting nothing is when they enter that offensive zone. It's like the Habs are just keeping them to the perimeter. There's not a lot of things happening in the middle of the ice. And sure, there's going to be some opportunities here and there, like obviously like the Spezza goal in front of the net. And, the Leafs are still going to get their opportunities. But for the most part, from what we saw in the regular season and even in the beginning of this series, specifically for Matthews and Marner, the opportunities, Lepore, just have not been there. So, like, what's your take on the play of those 2-star players, man? Because honestly, at the end of the day, they have got to come through in this game 7, because right now I do not have confidence in some of the depth guys in this lineup, as good as Spezza and Kerfoot and some of those guys have played. Like, those bottom 6 forwards are having a lot of trouble generating offense right now.
Yeah, you mentioned like Keefe's quote, and you mentioned how much money those 2 guys make. That boils my blood, man. Like when you're talking about depth guys and you say, yo, they haven't been scored on all series, or throughout the series, they're tied, so we're playing for even on those 3rd and 4th lines. I don't want to hear any bullshit about 2 guys making $22 million. You're not paying them $22 million to be 0-0. Those guys have to be above 0. I want to see in the pluses. Come on. That's a terrible, terrible quote. But I'm like you, Bruno, in the way that here we are with a podcast, but I think we're both fans who are very mathematical. As far as fans go, we're very logical. Like sometimes you lose a game, the puck doesn't go in for you. But there is a process to that. And you do get to a point where you don't care. You don't care. Like the takes like that used to exist back in the day, like in our childhood, the guys like the Sakic's, the Yzermans, they came through in big games. And today's hockey fan would just point to those and say, no, they were just really good players and the timing was right and they capitalized in the big moment. And that take is still given, but I think people are more mathematical now and more logical, like I said, to be closer to kind of like how we usually stand. But I'm going to go old school and say, like, I don't care. Like, I want you to take this game by the horns. This is an opportunity to shut everyone up. This is an opportunity to move on to a second round. It would be them losing this game 7. I don't know the word to say how powerful losing that game would be. Not, and this is deep, man. Like, now I'm going to get deep as a Maple Leafs fan. Okay, going back to like, hey, this era, like the Shanna plan and all that. And kind of how I said before, how we're both logical fans. You know, I'll even go further. We'll do post lockout. The 2013 loss to the Bruins. I didn't lose a wink of sleep that night. That team probably shouldn't even been in the playoffs. That team shouldn't have been in a game 7 against that Bruins team that made the Stanley Cup final. When they lost that game 7, again, I think I'm a little more neutral and like objective, and I hate to use logical, but I think I'm more logical than the average fan. I don't go on Twitter and flip out after every goal against. I wasn't too bothered by it. We lost to a better team in 7 by the end of the day, and it shouldn't have gone 7. It happened
honestly,
the way it happened.
It was almost a blessing in disguise because it led to the strip down and the rebuild and the Matthews era, because that team just wasn't good enough, like you said, that 2013 team.
2013, I actually have made the point that collapse in the third period in overtime may have been like a historical benefit to the Toronto Maple Leafs, because if they do win that series, and then in the second round, a lot of people don't remember, they would have played the Rangers, and that was the Rangers team right before they fired Tortorella. So it wasn't too strong of a Rangers team. If that team ends up in the conference finals, who knows like who they sign or what trade they make.
Could have got out of control
because they would have thought they were good. Carlisle would have got this like crazy extension. It could have been a disaster, right? Now we're going way back. But then moving forward, people are like, oh, the Leafs can't get out of the first round. Being a team of 20-year-olds and losing to the Washington Capitals, who won the President's Trophy, is not a devastating loss in the first round, everyone. And then again, the next year, losing to the Bruins, it went 7. And again, now they're second-year players. Like, again, they lost to a stacked Bruins team in 7 and lost game 7 on the road. Even the year after that, there was the Kadri suspension. That year, I really did think the Leafs deep down had a chance, and I probably even would have bet on them prior to the Kadri suspension. But again, you lost in 7 to a good team.
On the road again.
On the road. And it's funny, I always make the point, like, and now again, we're going all over the map here, which will probably happen throughout this podcast. People talking about the Leafs team and saying, oh, no heart, no character, they can't get past the first round. And then I'll quickly ask, well, the Boston Bruins, like, how are they built? Are they tough? Do they have heart and character? Yeah, absolutely. And then I say, well, then how'd the Leafs push them 7? It's not like they got swept. If they would have been getting swept, now we got problems. It went 7 if it wasn't for Jake Gardiner nightmares. So deep down, those games, of course, you're rattled. And, I guess even, sorry, I forgot about Columbus. A 5-game series. And people forget about that Columbus series. They essentially had the same points total we did. Yeah, in the regular season,
and they were one of the best defensive teams in the NHL last season.
With an excellent,
that's important to remember, because a lot of people think, oh, that Columbus team was trash and they had no one. Yeah, from an on paper maybe talent perspective, there was a big discrepancy. But when you actually looked at the numbers, they were one of the top 3 or 4 defensive teams in the league last season.
With a great goalie and Tortorella as a defensive-minded coach. Like, it wasn't as shocking, I think, as people thought. And the Leafs had a bad season. Their lineup wasn't that. I hated that team. They went through a coaching change. Like,
the COVID layoff.
Yeah, it was just
pandemic.
Weird.
Like, there was a lot going on last season, right? So you even give them a pass for that in a way, as disappointing as it was.
Exactly. And I'm not making excuses like through all these examples. I saw those losses as like those were possibilities that could happen. And again, like, it's sports, even if you are favored or whatever, like, things can happen. This game 7 is so important because, like, I will say it, like, of course the things have already started on Twitter and in forums of like, okay, what would they do in the offseason? And like, again, to my point about last year, when Toronto lost to Columbus, everybody knew our D is shit. Like, everyone knew, like, changes had to be made. Like, this D was not good enough. Again, like, I was barely bothered after that loss. I just knew that team wasn't good enough. Even if they would have got past Columbus, like, where was that team going? It was just not a nice team by any stretch of the imagination. But this team, objectively, like, this team has forward depth this team has a nice decor. Like, I'm not saying, oh, this is an elite decor. I hate to break to everyone, like, Morgan Riley's a good player. TJ Brody is a good player. Muzzin is a good player. Like, if you go down to the depth, like, Bogosian has had an excellent season. Like, these guys, like, think about it. Like, Travis Dermott, funny, after last night we were talking about this, but he's a serviceable defenseman. He can't get in the lineup.
Yeah, shows you how deep this team is.
He can't get in the lineup. Justin Holl this year is
the best decor I've seen in over a decade.
If you point to Justin Holl, even if someone said, Justin Holl is like average, I'd be like, okay, but you're pointing to one guy as like an average player. And if that's your point, and I'm not saying this D is a juggernaut. I'm just saying it's fine. Like it's average to above average, I'd say. And with that forward group, that might be all you need or should be all you need. And then we can say whatever we want about Campbell. The numbers are the numbers. Like, he can't, based on historical data we have of goalies, how much better could he actually be playing?
Lepore, he has a .937 save percentage in this series.
There you go.
What more can you ask out of this
What more
guy?
can you ask for? So, like, this Game 7 is so important because if they lose this game, it goes on two sides for me, Bruno. You know, every year, oh, what should they do? I'd be like, I have absolutely no idea. No idea. I even say to people, what's the worst contract on the Leafs?
I know it's a tough question.
Oh, Marner gets paid too much. Okay, so if a guy who's top 5 in scoring is making $1 million or two too much, I'd be like,
yeah, there's not really an egregious contract on this team. Like, maybe some people will point to the John Tavares contract, saying
even
then that's stretching it. And listen, yeah, like him making $11 million, he's not the John Tavares from like 5 years ago, but I mean, you could look at a lot worse contracts around the league than that John Tavares contract.
And again, I'd like to see, okay, John Tavares is a free agent tomorrow at $11 million. If there's interested teams, like there's a line of interested teams, like let's be real. But anyways, like on that end, I wouldn't know what to say. I wouldn't know what to do. And that is more bothersome than anything. And it goes back to my thing of like the Leafs. That's the only answer. It's the Leafs. And there's that thing in me that's like, this was like the year. And I say like, not the, oh, this is the year we're going to win the Stanley Cup. Like you need luck, you need bullshit, you need things to go your way. But let's call a spade, a runway to the semifinal, a runway. And like all these things, all these weird things, like the Tavares injury, now Muzzin's hurt. We talk about like how these like weird shooting numbers that make absolutely no sense. It's just like this pile up of shit that's just like, again, I don't have any other way to describe it, but it's just so Toronto Maple Leafs. And to my second point, all this, I think what's dangerous here, and I'll tell the story about it. So after the game last night, my wife looks at me and she says, "You're kind of freaking me out a little bit." And I looked at her and I say, "Why?" She's like, "You don't seem that bothered." It caught her so off guard that I wasn't like in shambles after a loss like that. And I think, and I'll say it, I wasn't surprised. We're
wasn't scarred, Lepore. It's
and I think
at that point, we're all scarred after all the
that's
years
a good
of
word,
bullshit
Bruno.
And the things that we have endured following this team, believing in this team. It just keeps happening over and over. It doesn't matter which players are on the ice. Doesn't matter who's behind the bench, who's in management. Everything just seems to rear its ugly head at the worst possible time.
Like, don't tell me they're not cursed. Don't tell me there aren't ghosts. And again, like her point of like the fear she had, the weirdness of the situation, that I wasn't rattled. I wasn't surprised. Even at 3-1, like this series being at 3-1, there was that thing in me like, I really hope this doesn't go back to Montreal. I was expecting a loss. I'll say it. I hate to say it as a Leaf fan. Like I had a terrible feeling about last night's game. And he'd be like, oh, the positive spins of like, oh, who cares about the fans? And I'm like, no, it's that whole thing of, again, I'm getting ahead of myself and thinking negative. But if they win tonight, well, now it's 7. And again, you can always say that, but it's a fact that this is my team and this is what I've dealt with. And I think that feeling I had last night, because she was right, I wasn't necessarily rattled because I was just waiting for it, is a bad thing for the Leafs and Leafs fans, because there's nothing worse than apathy. Like, I'm not kidding, Bruno. If this team loses this series, and like this sounds like overly dramatic and people saying you're being emotional after 2 straight tough losses, but it will change me as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. I will always bleed blue. I will always be the biggest Maple Leafs fan you'll ever find, but it will change me as a Maple Leafs fan because I will not care about anything other than playoff results. I swear. I think I would get this feeling of like, or almost like this like path as a fan of like, I will never be optimistic ever again. Connor McDavid could sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs for league minimum
and be like, oh, who cares?
I wouldn't even flinch. I'd be like, we'll probably be going out in the first round.
Yeah, who cares until they win a playoff series.
Until they're on a run. Like, I'm not going to get interested or I'm not going to get excited. And that is dangerous. Yeah. That to me is very dangerous because I think a lot of people would kind of be like that. Because again, I listed all the things about this season. It's almost like if it doesn't happen now, and again, someone winning
when the fuck is it going to happen?
Yeah, when the fuck is it going to happen? Like, guys, it couldn't have been like, so think of the timing of all this. Let's say even this Canadian division would have happened during like the Kessel Leafs. It would have been like just bad timing in the way of like, oh, I wish we would have had a good team now. No, well, guess what, everyone? We do. We have a great team. I really and truly believe, regardless of COVID or the divisions, this is the best Maple Leafs team on paper of my life. And they got put in this division with a runway to the semifinals. And this is happening. This is happening.
It's absolutely insane. And I went on Twitter last night, Lepore, and I said that this to me will vault above the 2013 Bruins 4-1 collapse.
Not even
as
close.
The number one unquestioned, most disappointing, most embarrassing, most pathetic collapse, honestly, in Leafs history. Like, to lose, this is, does everyone realize this is a 24-win Montreal Canadiens team? They won 24 games in a 56-game season. A couple shows ago, I talked about how this is the weakest first-round opponent the Leafs have faced, just in terms of record, since the 1996 St. Louis Blues. Like Lepore mentioned, the runway was there. It was on a silver platter. This is the best, most well-rounded Leafs team, offensively, defensively, goaltending-wise, that me and Lepore have both seen in our lifetimes. Honestly, I can't think of another team since I have been on this planet that has been better than the 2021 Leafs. I really can't. Everything was there. And people that know me, I'm a very logical person, okay? I love numbers. I love stats. I always use that to guide my decision-making, to guide my opinions, the way I think about sports in general, okay? And people that know me also know that I love fantasy hockey, and I like betting, and I join a lot of playoff pools, and I do this all the time, okay? And listen, being the Leaf fan that I am, and, you know, people sometimes will call us homers on this podcast because it's a Leafs podcast, but at the end of the day, I think me and Lepore are both very logical fans, and we don't get carried away. We're rational thinkers. And I just want to let you guys know, okay, so I enter hockey pools every single year. I never pick the Leafs in my playoff hockey. Never. Okay, so people that think that I'm this Leafs homer, I'm always thinking up here with my head, okay? I plot out my bracket before the playoffs, and I, you know, going back to when the Leafs were facing the Bruins, right, in the first round, it was a difficult road to get to the Cup final. You got to go through Boston, then you got to go through Tampa.
Yeah.
The team just wasn't quite ready. I was never that bullish on those teams, right? And even going back to last year, like we talked about, the coaching change, the whole Mike Babcock fiasco, the pandemic, all the injuries they had last season. It was just a complete shit show. Didn't feel comfortable about them last season either. This is the first season, Lepore, that I loaded up on Leafs in my playoff pool. Loaded up on them. I was so convinced that this was the season based on everything we saw, based on the opponent they're facing in round one, this Montreal Canadiens team that has been, honestly, quite frankly, a complete train wreck the last 2 months of the season.
To your point about Montreal, someone brought up last night. So inflated to an 82 game season. Think about this. This series is going 7. If we inflate the standings to 82 games, the Leafs would have finished 26 points and 16 wins ahead of Montreal. Like 26 points.
And there you
Incredible.
go. Like it's insane. Like this Montreal team, they're just not good.
Yeah,
At
the Leafs would have
day,
scored. The Leafs scored on average a half goal more. And think they had the identical schedules. The Leafs scored a half goal more and allowed a third of a goal less on average. Like these two teams are not on the same planet.
It's
actually
insane. And you know what? I'm sick and tired. I don't want to hear this bullshit. The regular season doesn't mean anything. We can't look at it. What are you looking at then? These teams have now played each other 16 fucking times this year. I don't want to hear this bullshit. That's a huge sample size. They've played 16 times, Lepore. I don't want to hear another fucking word from anybody telling me you can't look at the regular season and you can't look at some of the stats in the playoffs. Then what are we looking at? People? We're just gonna ignore all evidence?
You should pick your favorite
Wake
team.
the fuck up. This is a team that has dominated Montreal all season. Okay, everything. They should win this series. They should still win Game 7. I get it. It's playoff hockey. Crazy things happen. At the end of the day, this is a rubber puck that's bouncing around the ice. It could take crazy deflections. Goals are going in off guys' skates, off guys' sticks. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, you look at the rosters, you look at the depth, you look at the talent, you look at the underlying numbers, you look at everything from a logical perspective. The Leafs should win this series. So don't give me this bullshit that after watching 16 games between these teams this season, that you are actually going to sit there and tell me that the Montreal Canadiens are a better team and should win this series. Like, none of it makes any sense. And
we're not saying it's an excuse. Again, we're just saying like it's the Leafs.
Yeah, it's almost
That's
at this
the only
point like
explanation.
there's no explanation. Like, look at the other series. Okay, Colorado. Phenomenal team this year. Amazing at 5-on-5. Star talent, depth throughout the lineup. Just annihilate the St. Louis Blues, a team that just won the Stanley Cup 2 seasons ago. Didn't matter. Colorado annihilates them. Tampa Bay, great team. They get Kucherov and Stamkos back. Florida Panthers, see you later in 6 games. The Hurricanes, they were favorites over the Nashville Predators. That series obviously went further than Hurricanes fans would have hoped, but they disposed of the Nashville Predators. The Vegas Golden Knights, who we talked about, that could be an upset. We both thought that Minnesota had a chance to win that series.
Yeah,
I picked Vegas in 7. You had Minnesota winning, but that honestly could have gone either way. At the end of the day, Vegas won that series. Lepore, the teams that should be winning all these series this season, and think about it, this is unlike any year we've ever seen, right? It's not a year where you're playing a team only 3 or 4 times in the regular season. You are getting a big sample size. The Leafs played the Habs 10 times this season.
Yeah, or because of different divisions. Or because of different divisions, teams don't really have the same schedule. No, everyone's got the same schedule this year. Like, the standings mean more now than they ever have.
Exactly. So that's why I don't want to hear this complete and utter bullshit from people saying, oh, you can't look at any of that stuff. When you play a team 10 times, you would be foolish to ignore that. Yeah. That is a massive sample size in a 56-game season. And I get it. I know the Edmonton Oilers got swept. That was a lot closer of a series than people realize, as embarrassing as that was for Edmonton. But at the end of the day, my point is that all of these teams that should be winning, that we picked to win, that we thought were going to win, they have won their playoff series, Lepore.
Yeah. As I was saying before,
the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are now going to a Game 7 against a not very good Montreal Canadiens team.
As I was saying, the thing again with Don Lucian giving the Leafs an 82% chance to win, that's essentially giving Montreal no chance to win. Because, like, as we touched on, like, it's hockey, things go off people. You almost have to give a team something, because the fact of the matter is anything can happen. There is that element of luck and whatever. And guys, you can argue all day long. That's the math. That's the math. Based on all the data that's been accumulated, he essentially gave the Montreal Canadiens no chance to win. And again, it's not excuses. We're just saying this is our team. And it's funny, you mentioned the playoff, the pool you did. I was doing my nephew's, his hockey team had one, and it was for the regular season, and he was picking all Leafs. And as he's doing it, he's like, oh, okay, Matthews, Marner. I'm like, okay. He's picking. I'm like, yeah, they're going to score. But what cost us the pool is he picked Anderson.
Oh,
And even too, it's like even at the time, I'm like, Vasilevsky, bro. Like maybe you want to take Vasilevsky or
play it safe.
Yeah, he's like, oh no, Anderson. I'm like, and it cost us. I mean, but I don't know, funny story. But it's just it's bananas. It's absolutely bananas. And they have a chance here. They have a chance here to shut us all up. And like, I know it's so easy to say, but guys, like, just take this opportunity and do it. And I think what sucks, and like talking as a fan, again, funny how we were saying before how we consider ourselves pretty logical and mathematical. It's during the whole COVID thing when the hockey was on break, they were showing all the classic games. I'm sure everyone sat back and watched a few of those. And they had the Game 7 Blues and Red Wings from 96 when Yzerman came over the blue line and slapped home the top corner goal on John Casey. And Yzerman's going bananas. The crowd's going bananas. I can't imagine Red Wings fans watching from their couch. Of course, they're going crazy. And I thought to myself, watching that, I was like, I've never had that. Or it's been a heck of a long time. Like since I had that of like watching on my couch and the Leafs score like a crazy overtime goal or get the puck out, defend a lead to win a series and that like jump up. We haven't had that.
Yeah, I have no idea how that feels, Lepore. I'm right there with you.
And I was sitting on my couch, man, in Game 5 after tying it, going into the overtime, and I would like, you're telling yourself, you're trying not to tell yourself, like, I'm gonna get that moment.
The moment is finally here.
Yeah, like I'm gonna get that moment. A 3-goal comeback. And like that. And again, like add it to the chapter, add it to the list. And then again, last night. It's like you're in that moment, the comeback, 2 late goals. How does that happen? Another one they brought up was it combined the NBA and the MLB teams being up 3-1. That team wins. And I don't know if it's really fair to use the NBA because like there's big gaps in teams, but teams that are up 3-1 win 94% of the time, I think it was. And that doesn't include favorites. Like I'd love to see that number of like how often the team that's favored to win the series that is up 3-1 and doesn't win the series. So if they don't, again, add it to the list. But this will be, to me, like, even if the Leafs blew a 3-1 lead, say if they blew a 3-1 lead to Tampa or Boston, like that sucks.
Yeah, but you're more like you can. It's easy.
You get
to
it.
Accept.
Yeah, dude. Well, I'll say I'm a Cleveland Indians fan. Okay, random, I know. So I'm a Cleveland Indians fan, and we were up 3-1 in the World Series, and we blew it. We looked amazing in those first few games, and then we lost 3 straight to the Cubs, and we even had home field. And I remember, of course, I was rattled. You're upset that you blew the 3-1 lead, but I just more looked at the totality of it that we lost because the Cubbies on paper were a way better team than the Indians. It's just, we got that luck or those numbers went our way for the early games of the series to put us up 3-1. So I could kind of get like, I even at 3-1, I was fearful. Like, no, this Cubs team's loaded. They can come back. We're the heavy favorite. Like, that's what makes this so unbelievable that like this is happening. And again, like I said, they have a chance to squash this. They have a chance to change the narrative. I'm interested to see, man, like you mentioned the betting thing. Like I'm picturing it now, like Toronto at home, again, on paper, like so much better than this Montreal Canadiens
team. The series
team.
should be over.
What's that line going to be in that game? Like you had to guess the line. It's going to be like -200 Toronto.
Yeah, I think something like that. -190, -200. I think the last game, I think this game 6, I think it was, what was it? Like I think it was -180.
And think about that. Like think how much credit Vegas is giving the Leafs and not giving Montreal. The game was in Montreal and the whole thing with fans. Montreal had a big win the game before. Like you never see that. Like in the playoffs, a -180 team on the road. Never.
But Vegas has no idea.
Yeah, but Vegas is exactly. They only go by numbers and they're unaware of the gods, I guess. But
yeah, it's absolutely wild, man. Like I just cannot believe this series is going to a game 7. Like, And just thinking about all of the things that have happened, like game one, you have the John Tavares incident, and it was brutal. Listen, at the end of the day, I've said this, Lepore said this. Tavares is out. That's $11 million of your $80 million salary cap. Like, that's a big deal. It matters. It's a big loss. And especially if the Leafs actually get through this series and advance further in the playoffs, not having John Tavares is going to matter. But in this series, there's no excuse. I don't give a shit that John Tavares is not here right now. I am not using that as an excuse, Lepore. Like,
no, you can't.
This team has proven to me that they can outplay the Habs. It doesn't matter. And you look at that overtime period, obviously the Jake Muzzin injury, and it looks like he's probably going to be out now. I haven't checked the latest update on him, but it looked like he pulled his groin, some sort of lower body
I
issue.
tore my labrum years back. The way he moved, and I'm like, that's a groin. Like you knew right away.
It just didn't look good. And then obviously Nick Foligno, who is clearly still battling through an injury. He doesn't look great. So you think about that. No John Tavares, no Jake Muzzin, Nick Foligno playing at what? 60%, let's call it. And the Leafs utterly dominated that overtime period. So to me, and listen, I know that they got dominated in the first period. It was a brutal start. But when the Leafs want to play their game, when they play the way that they're designed to play, all four lines, attacking, the possession, the aggressive offensive style, this Montreal Canadiens team just cannot hang with them. They can't. And at the end of the day, all it came down to was one mistake. And I feel like we have seen
in both games.
Both games. And that's hockey, right? That's hockey. At the end of the day, you make a mistake and the other team can go the other way and make you pay and put it in the back of the net. And that's what happened in these two overtime games. But for the Leaf fans out there that want to start making excuses about all these injuries, like, I get it. The Leafs, it's getting to a point now where they're getting thin. Like, Sandin's going to have to come back into the lineup, which honestly isn't like a horror scenario by any means, because we've talked about Sandin this year. Like, he's a really good player. I know he had an absolutely awful game 5 with the giveaways, and he just looked like he was overmatched physically. But for him to come back into the lineup, that by no means is a horror scenario here. Okay. I'm not scared about Sandin coming back into this lineup, but for the Leaf fans out there that want to start making excuses about the injuries, if they were playing Boston, if they were playing Tampa, if they were playing an actual, like, really good high-end team, I'd say, you know what? Okay. With all these injuries, this is an issue now.
Yeah,
like,
it's
this
tough
is,
to hang around.
Like, we're not going to get through, all of this happening at once. But I'm sorry, and this is no disrespect to the Montreal Canadiens and their fans. This is a team that you have to beat. I'm sorry. Like, it's like you said, Lepore, the line has been drawn in the sand with Leaf fans. It's gotten to the point now where it's like, if they lose this game 7, no one is going to give a flying fuck what
it's
they
not
do
even
in the regular season from here on out. Like, I don't care how many Rocky Richards, Austin Matthews wins. I don't care if Mitch Marner wins a scoring title. I don't care if Morgan Riley wins the Norris Trophy. Like, I do not care. I don't care if the Leafs win the President's Trophy. No one is going to care. None of that is going to matter until they can prove, until this core specifically can prove that they can win a playoff series.
Yeah.
Like,
going into the
too
series,
much to ask?
No, because we're all going to be there. But it was when the day after game 1, someone asked me, like, how I felt about the series. And I said, I put it at 50-50. I said, and they were shocked that I would say that. And I said, well, they already have one game, and now we don't have Tavares. But, and then, not that I was trying to make preemptive excuses not having Tavares, but like we touched on last week, it was a big deal, and we were already down 1. So just basic math, if we have to win 4, they have to win 3 at this point. But as the series rolled on, like, it showed that it didn't have the impact I thought it would. And I think if had this been like a normal series in the way of more of a back and forth, I may have put something on the Tavares thing. But no, you showed you could win 3 straight against Montreal, and you thoroughly outplayed them in all those games. So you can't just decide to use it as an excuse now.
Yeah,
like,
that's not going to work.
That's not good. Sorry, guys. Like, yeah, it's going to be something, man. Like, this game is so important. for like I said, for this team, for these fans, because it's gonna change a lot of fans. Can you? I said to someone last night, can you imagine like what's Kyle Dubas thinking right now?
And here's the thing, you know what, Lepore? I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about Kyle Dubas for a second, because
Okay.
I know that there's people out there that want to start blaming Dubas and
No,
blaming Sheldon Keefe. I'm sorry.
no.
This is not on Kyle Dubas. And you can look at Sheldon Keefe, and I know people have been frustrated with how he's used Joe Thornton and some of the other things they've done with the power play. At the end of the day, Joe Thornton is not playing a primary role. He's not out there, playing 20 minutes a night. He's still playing in a bottom six role. I know he's on that first power play unit right now with Tavares out, and you can question that all you want. And I don't necessarily agree with that decision from Sheldon Keefe, but this is not on Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe. This is on the players. And when I look at Kyle Dubas sitting up in that press box, Lepore, he just looks like us at this point.
Yeah.
Like, he is completely and utterly just stunned. He's like, I cannot, like, I'm just looking at him, and he's got to be thinking, I cannot fucking believe that this team that I have assembled this year, the team that ripped through the regular season, the best Leafs team we've seen in a long time, I cannot believe that this is going 7 games and that all these things are happening. Like, he must just be flabbergasted at this point.
Yeah. Those like locker room clean out interviews, or like when he always does his presser at the end of a season, that if they lose on Monday, that'll be an interesting talk, because like, what are you gonna say? Like, then even too, he added at the deadline, like with all that, like they had a great season and he made them stronger. Like, he's got to be sitting there like, and again, maybe he's too young. Maybe he's unaware of all these ghosts that I talk about that fall into the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But it's funny because like in sports, like I said earlier, certain things can't be explained. They just happen. But with this, I can't think of like a greater example of this. Like, and again, like I don't follow teams like I follow the Toronto Maple Leafs, but just in quick memory of a team like this happening too. Because again, it's not, if the Leafs were getting goalied, like I said earlier, okay, that's what it is, and you can point to that. This is just so many random, in both individual and broad things that are building a mountain together, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
It's all happening at the worst possible time. And yeah, like, even just going back to Kyle Dubas, like, what else could he have done? For those out there, wanting to just quickly play the blame game here with Dubas and throw him under the bus, like what else could he have done with this roster?
The only things you can point to are things that you could say, like people say, oh, this money should have been distributed here. But we're not saying to win the cup, guys. Like, we're saying to like win a round is what we're saying. Like, come on, no one could look at this roster and be like, this is a team that should go on a run. Again, debate all day long about how far and win or whatever. But even the biggest Leaf hater in the world has to be like, man, this is a pretty good friggin' lineup, and this team is capable of going on a run. So
yeah, it's gotten to the point now where it's like nothing even makes sense.
Yeah, like nothing matters. It's kind of like that. That's how I think a lot of Leafs fans feel today, to the point about like not caring about regular seasons and President's trophies and all that. It's like nothing matters. And that goes back to what I said before about apathy. Like, nothing's going to matter to me. Nothing. Because I'll just have this like cloud of like, shit's going to hit the fan and everything's going to come crumbling down. And it's just this curse that we've been given for whatever reason, that each story anyone has on why they're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, I guess is how I see it and how I would put it.
Yeah. And you know what? And like we talked about, Lepore, as bad as it is right now, and as scared as Leaf fans are, and as scarred as we all are, at the end of the day, they have an opportunity to squash this narrative forever. If they can find a way, and listen, they are now on home ice, everybody. This game 7 is on home ice. This wasn't the Bruins series, facing a really good Bruins team. Both of those years were essentially, they were an elite team. One of those years, Boston got to the Cup final. I'm talking about just in the Matthews era. Obviously, that 2013 Bruins team got to the Cup final as well. But that was a tough spot for the Leafs facing those
Yeah.
Bruins teams in 2018 and 2019 on the road in Boston. That's a tough spot, man. With a young Leafs team that's still finding their way, as talented as they were on paper. But it's there for the taking. You're the better team. You're the favorite. You have more depth. You have more talent. You're on home ice. You can squash all of these narratives. It's right there. It's right there. And all they have to do is show up for one night. Just show up for one night and win this series. Because we talked about this on the last show, Lepore, or it may have been a couple shows ago. And I said that this first round series against Montreal will probably be the most pressure-packed series that the Leafs play the entire playoffs. And now this might be the only series they play in the playoffs at this point. But I just thought about it. Like, we all know about the narrative, right? The first round choke artists, the Leafs always find a way to lose. There's so much pressure on just winning this first series. I think if they can just find a way to dig deep and win this game 7, they are going to play with more freedom and confidence. And I really think it's going to be a huge, huge monkey off their back, Lepore. Like, I really do. Like, if they find a way to win this game 7 and roll into round 2, I think we're going to finally see that Leafs team.
Here we go.
Basically throughout the entire season and through the first 4 games against Montreal. I really do.
It's hard for me to, I'll say it's hard for me to believe in them right now going like to those levels, but because they got to show me. But I'd like to even like list games, man, like where this falls in terms of like the history of the franchise. Like I'm not going to say it's like the most important game in the history of the franchise, but it's up there. It's definitely up there. It will be the most disappointing collapse or loss or however people want to spin it, maybe ever, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, cause I mean, going back to, in the in the original 6 era, they were a really good team. And then in the 70s they were a good team, not a great team. In the 80s, they were a bad team. And then the 90s, devastating loss to the Kings in 93 in game 7. But like, that's probably number 1. And this is probably just because of the fact that they were a game away from the Stanley Cup final. But in terms of like pure, you know what? I'll use the word embarrassment. Like this is embarrassing. Like, this is like that thing of when you get chirped, you have no comeback. And quite often, I think torture and bad things happening to your team kind of serve as a badge of honor. Because I've kind of joked around with people, like, what's the fun in cheering for a really good team? It's like when someone's like, oh, I'm a Patriots fan. I'm like, oh, that's not fun. Like, you win a championship, what do? You just crack open a beer and say, woo, another one? Or if you grew up a Red Wings fan, like, they just were so good all the time and they were in the playoffs going deep every year. But I don't think Leafs fans will use this one that way. Like, I think we've kind of always had that pride. And I'll say it, like, people would always say, like, oh, Leafs fans. I'd be like, what about Leafs fans? What, like, look, there's teams that don't fill buildings, the teams where like profits go down, TV contracts change. Leafs fans haven't flinched after everything we've been through. And I've always been kind of proud of that. Like, don't question the fandom of the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base.
Oh, Lepore, I'm so happy you brought this up, because nothing drives me more nuts than hearing about a Patriots fan who, is between the ages of like 25 and 35 or 25 and 40, telling me you're a Patriots fan or you're a Red Wings fan or a Colorado Avalanche fan. Like, that's why Leaf fans, Lepore, I have so much respect for every Leaf fan out there.
Because it sucks.
And honestly, like, shout out to every single Leaf fan out there, because you have been through all the bullshit over the years.
It takes
like
a lot.
Lepore just said, you have not flinched. And I think that's very important. Especially if you're from the GTA, if you're from Toronto, if you've been cheering for this team since you were a kid and you have not flipped, you've not gone to another team just because they're winning, shout out to you. I think that's really important, because there's a lot of people that'll just say, F this, I'm going to cheer for a winning franchise. I'm going to go cheer for the Chicago Blackhawks or the LA Kings. Leaf fans? No. They're a special breed, Lepore.
We're especially dumb. Is this the way to put
that
it?
Too? You can say that too. That's
but like this
fair.
This whole thing with my rant is like I was getting to like the badge of honor of like things you've been through. Like I think this almost kind of like crosses the line, because like yeah, like I'm still here and we were close. Like no, this is just like this is humiliation. Like a loss on Monday is pure like all the jokes you hear, and again like I've always said it's harder for me being a Leafs fan not in Toronto, like to the point you made about like living in the GTA, because it's easy for you guys because you're all surrounded by other Leafs fans. When you go to a game, it's only Leafs fans. I'm surrounded by Senators fans, and even being in Ottawa, so close to Montreal, and even with the history of the Montreal Canadiens franchise, on like, and the Sens aren't that old, there's a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans in this city. So as a Leafs fan, like you go to war with people. Like when you go to games on the streets, like talking, chirping, whatever, you got to man up as a Leafs fan. And if they lose this game on Monday, it will change me, because like the chirp, the whatever, okay, like it will be different. It will be different. Like I'll have no comeback. Like
yeah, we're just that's how I'll put it. Point.
It's like almost, it's like it sounds defeatist, but like even though like how I said before, oh, Leafs can't get past the first round, I was defending it with like, yeah, well, it's Boston. No, now what do I say? We're playing a team that
there's nothing you can say in this situation.
We're playing a team that you could argue if we had a typical regular season wouldn't even be in the playoffs.
Yeah, you could argue this was the worst team that made the playoffs this season.
Oh, for sure you could. Yeah, for sure you could.
Like if you rank them 1 through 16, I think the Montreal Canadiens are probably the worst team. I really do. Yeah. I mean, because even like you think about like the Blues being the 4 seed in the West Division, getting steamrolled by Colorado. At the end of the day, like it's St. Louis. They just won the Cup a couple of years ago. Yeah. They got some really good players on that roster. Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko, Binnington, and net. You know, like they got some players, man. And
well, to simplify it, everyone was chirping the Canadian division all year, while the Habs finished 4th in the Canadian division. Yeah, so like I would just sum it up that way.
Like this Habs team, man. Like I know, you know, Tyler Toffoli had a good year and Jeff Petrie had a nice season, but at the end of the day, this team, when you look at it, it's just not very good. And like you said, Lepore, for the Leafs to lose in this spot in the first round would be a complete embarrassment. There is no excuse for it. It would be a complete and utter disaster.
Yeah. And I'm going to say it, man. And like people may throw shit at me for this one. And this is not me making excuses. I give zero credit to Montreal. Zero. And if a Canadiens fan would come firing at me, I'd say it's not hard to beat a team that's cursed. Would kind of be my comeback. Like, we can't get out of our own way. It's not hard. What have you done? You showed up. The Buffalo Sabres could have showed up and beaten us. My nephew's novice AA team could have showed up and beat the Leafs, like the way things are going, because there'd be a 3-way collision in the warm-up that would happen and we'd be finished, and the Marlies would be getting put in the lineup, or something crazy would happen. And I'm just, they can't get out of their own way, sums it up. And hopefully our podcast on Tuesday is a happy one. And we're like, remember when we were all negative? But yeah, this whole thing is just so, I started the podcast like this, and I think we're kind of getting to the end of it now. I'll finish it like this. Open quote, the Toronto Maple Leafs, close quote. That's it. Yeah, it's our life.
There's really nothing else.
You signed up for it. I was telling my wife last time, I'm like, I feel bad for my nephew. That like I signed him up for this for his entire life now, because
yeah, I guess I gotta blame my father for making me a Leaf fan, because I mean he's the one that started all this. I gotta have a talk with him.
Yeah, my father came from southern Italy on a boat, so he didn't know hockey too well. So
oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves into, Lepore, with this hockey team? Like I was on the podcast last week and I said, there is a better chance of an asteroid hitting Earth than the Montreal Canadiens beating the Toronto Maple Leafs 3 times in a row. And now it might actually happen. I don't know if an asteroid is on its way to hit our planet. I have no idea. The universe seems all screwed up right now, but also in a weird, crazy way, the universe is not screwed up because the Leafs are just doing what they do.
It's par for the course.
This is par for the course with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So as we wrap up this podcast, Leaf fans, it's an emotional time. It really is. I'm sure a lot of people were just sitting there on their couches last night, just kind of staring into the abyss. And, there were people that were probably really mad and swearing and all pissed off. But I think a lot of people were also just sort of sitting there, literally staring into the abyss, thinking it's actually happening again. And I am just numb to the pain. I have all these scars, and this is it. This is life as a Leaf fan. We are just used to feeling pain and more pain and even more pain. Yeah. But saying all that, the Leafs have an opportunity on Monday night in Game 7 on home ice to just completely wash away all of the crap that has happened over the last little while. A chance to finally take the bull by the horns and win a Game 7 and prove to everyone, prove to themselves, prove to Leaf fans, prove to the NHL that this team can actually get through adversity when it matters and win a playoff series. So I can't wait, Lepore. It's going to be awesome. And it's going to be a very emotional Game 7.
I don't know how I'm going to go. I don't know how I'm going to go into it. Like, I don't know how I'm going to feel in the morning watching it. I remember, and it's just dawned in my head, I remember hearing Chris Johnston in an interview, and he said, I think it was the discussion was who's going to be the captain. And he said that Austin Matthews wants to be Kobe Bryant. That was Chris Johnston's quote. Let's see it, 34.
Let's see it, Austin. And I think that's the perfect way to end this thing off. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, you're the star players here. Star players in big games come through. It's as simple as that. They come through. They have big time performances when their team season is on the line. If you want to be that player, if you want to be known in Toronto for the rest of your life as a player that came through when it mattered, then this Game 7 is everything for those two star players.
Yeah,
no more excuses. They need to come through for this team. And I can't wait. I can't wait, Lepore, for Monday night. It's going to be awesome.
To your point, like what you just said, I was thinking I'd like to look them right in the eye and say, how do you want to be remembered? Because nothing else will matter. Like it's almost kind of sad in a weird way too. Like Austin Matthews had a historical season for the rest of our lives, and even for the rest of his life. Yeah, but for that season,
no one's gonna care.
No one cares
on Monday night.
We'll almost look at it as kind of like a cringe.
Yeah,
because there's going to be the NHL awards when he's up there with the statue and whatever, the trophy. It'll be every time I see that image, I'll feel gross.
Yeah,
and be like, yeah, way to go, Austin. And it's not even a matter of like shitting on him. Just like it'll serve as the reminder, and we'll just constantly get reminded by every other fan base. And not that really matters, but hey, it's fans. We chirp. It's fun. It's why we're fans. It's supposed to be fun, but we'll be the rest of his life. So,
and that's it, Leafs. You have it. The moment is there. You're the better team on home ice. Get the job done just one time.
Make us happy just once.
Just one time.
Give us that moment just once.
That's all we're asking for. It's gone to the point now that if the Leafs win this first round series against a 24-win Montreal Canadiens team, it is going to feel like winning the Stanley Cup.
How bad is that?
It really is. As sad as that sounds, it's going to feel like winning the Stanley Cup. But that is going to do it for episode 21 of the Gluttons for Punishment podcast.
I can't believe we made the whole show without crying.
Well,
maybe we'll save that for Tuesday.
There might be tears on our next show.
Yeah.
But that is going to do it, everybody. And we will be back with another show after Game 7 at some point. We'll probably drop the episode on Tuesday because we're going to have to talk about it regardless, because This is jam-packed, man. There's emotions flowing left, right, and center. This is it for all Leaf fans, man. This is so huge. So stay tuned for that next episode. But that's going to do it for this one. And once again, if you are a new listener, we would really appreciate it if you go to Apple and give us a 5-star rating and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, it would be a big time help. You have no idea how much this helps. If you just smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and then, of course, ring that notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is dropping some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Happy Game 7, everybody, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.